morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is day 2 in our new digs and the first with Lindsey Granger in the new studio. Hello.
I'm back. I missed you so much.
I missed you as
well. I was
going
crazy. I couldn't even sleep. I was like, where's my friend?
You've been all over the place.
I did. I went to Turkey, better known as Turkey, because Erdogan has asked people to call it that.
Oh.
And you just got back from Italy, right?
I know. We were both abroad. How about that?
Enjoying. And then I was getting I was saying all the New York Times and all the news alerts. I'm like, wow, you missed 1 week of news and you feel like you missed a year.
Yeah, you were gone for the entire U.S.-Iran war.
So there was a lot, but I'm sure I missed a couple of radars about that. So tell me what's on your radar today.
Well, today we are tackling a different subject. X CEO Linda Yaccarino is stepping down after 2 years at the helm of Elon Musk's social media site, which he purchased in October 2022. Now, Musk hired Yaccarino in June of 2023 to run Twitter and rebranded it as X the following month. Yaccarino wrote on X, "When Elon Musk and I first spoke of his vision for X, I knew it would be the opportunity of a lifetime to carry out the extraordinary mission of this company. I'm immensely grateful to him for entrusting me with the responsibility of protecting free speech, turning the company around, and transforming X into the Everything app." Elon responded, thanking her for her contributions. Yaccarino also received affirmation from many conservative, libertarian, and independent commentators, including Megyn Kelly, Michael Shellenberger, and Charlie Kirk, who credit her with guiding X through a tumultuous time, attracting advertisers back to the site while living up to Musk's free speech commitments. Not all reactions were positive, however. Musk's archenemy, Steve Bannon, weighed in on his own show, vowing to pursue her legally wherever she goes. Bannon said, "You can run, baby, but you can't hide." Watch this.
Hey, Linda, you can run, baby, but you can't hide. You're not going to hide from the lawsuits, girl. We know why you're stepping down and why you're running. Okay, we understand why you're stepping down and why you're running. That Elmo's out of control. Sorry, baby, that came with the job. You took the job, you took the pay, you took the warrants, you took the stock options, you took all, the hundreds of millions of dollars you're going to make. No. If you can't keep Elmo in the nursery and keep him under control, you're going to pay a price.
The Elmo Bannon refers to there is, of course, Elon Musk. Bannon and Musk are at war because they represent two different contingents of the MAGA base. Bannon's faction is the stridently anti-immigrant, economic populist side, and Musk represents the more libertarian, market-inclined, pro-free speech side. They've been jockeying for influence over President Donald Trump since the beginning of Trump's second term, with each side scoring some victories and losing on other issues. Musk is currently at odds with Trump entirely and plans to launch his own political party, the America Party. Meanwhile, Bannon's faction is demoralized over Trump's recent foreign policy decisions with respect to Iran, and also the Epstein files fizzle. It should be noted that the Elon faction isn't happy about either of those things either. It's actually a third tiny little faction, the neoconservatives, who seem most pleased, unfortunately, with how things are going, but I digress. Now, recently, Musk actually accused Steve Bannon of being in the Epstein files. That's why Bannon's going so hard against him now, threatening lawsuits, calling on Trump to deport him. Bannon said Musk is not an American, he's a South African, and in response, Musk called Bannon a fat, drunken slob who has a lifetime of crime to pay for. You're not entertained? Well, let's set aside Musk versus Bannon for just a moment. When it comes to Yaccarino, I agree with Megyn Kelly, Michael Shellenberger, and company. Everybody in the MAGA movement owes Yaccarino a round of applause, not thinly veiled threats and insults. She accomplished a great deal. It was not easy to win advertisers back to the platform while still changing the site's moderation policies to comport with Musk's vision of unfettered free speech. As former State Department official and tech policy expert Mike Benz wrote on X, Linda stood up and fought for free speech during arguably its most acute crisis moment in world history, when we're almost on the brink of losing it. She stepped up for all of us in the face of what seemed like insurmountable pressure from governments, advertisers, boycotters, banking institutions, and astroturfed lynch mobs. Thank Linda for her service and excited for her next chapter. I'm with Mike, and I'm sad to see X's CEO become the X CEO. For the work of protecting social media, the new town square from censorship continues. And also from just bad business decisions. I don't know if you've seen that Grok has gone a bit haywire in the last 48 hours. And while I appreciate it, I guess, being politically incorrect, I think they tweaked it a little bit too far in that direction, and that needs correction. But I'm grateful for what Yaccarino has done. I think it's not easy to balance all these different factions, to manage Elon Musk personally. As much affection as I do have for him, I think he is, I don't mean this as a dig. I think he can be difficult to work with and for. So I think she did a great job.
I mean, she definitely was trying to maintain and manage corporate responsibility and credibility. She said that she would allow people to have this freedom of speech, but I think that X, which was Twitter when she first got there, became a place of like constant hate and negativity. And there's so much on there where the platform has allowed you to say anything, but advertisers have pulled out of the platform under her reign. And yes, she said she brought some of them back, but not nearly close to the spending levels they were prior to some of their content being laid next to, let's say, Nazi speech or something that was, wildly inappropriate for an advertiser. And because she created this haven of like everyone say and do whatever you want, I think it created a kind of an uncomfortable situation where she's running a platform where a lot of times you'll see an overwhelming amount of negativity or hate speech or something. You want to kind of just have at least a decent filter, especially someone coming from a place like NBC Universal, where she pulled in advertisers for a major network. No matter what you feel about their content, they definitely have a lot of advertisers, right? And she's worked with them. So to bring those relationships over and have Elon Musk be so erratic in the way that he was, and try to balance it. I'm not sure that it did a great job, because do I like X better than I liked Twitter a couple of years ago? Not really. Do you? Maybe. I think you might like it a little bit more. You said it's become more of a welcoming place specifically for conservative.
Yes, certainly. I prefer the moderation now. I don't know that I like it better, though, because people, it used to be easier to interact. You used to do more interaction and have more arguments with people you disagree with. And I feel like a lot of the people I disagree with left the platform to go to Blue Sky. And now, instead of having everyone in the same place arguing, we're now a little bit more siloed, which I don't think is a good thing. I do prefer the moderation now. The claims about it being so hateful, I think certainly I see more hateful content, I think, than I used to, or at least from conservatives. I see less hateful content from liberals or the left, just because there are fewer of them on the platform. Some of the claims that drove advertisers away, however, were false or misleading, made by activist groups trying to pressure advertisers to leave, that were like, oh yes, look at how your advertisements are next to hate. And then when you looked closer at that, that was manufactured and was very unlikely to occur naturally in the wild. So I think some of the reasons the advertisers left were for activist-driven, not actually business decisions. That said, there is, clearly more hate on the site. Look what Grok itself is doing. But that's not Grok is a feature that they have that needs correction, and then it will not. It's not freely choosing of its own. I said this yesterday. It is not alive. It has no views or desires of its own. It has been programmed to do this or this, and it has been tampered with in a way that is not good, that needs to be fixed.
And I think it's a little bit alarming to me to think about what the next iteration of X is, because there's so many people on there, and now we know it's becoming this social experiment for Elon Musk that now XAI is heavily involved in, and that means this is a lot more AI, and like you said, the Grok issue. So what does that mean when the leadership is not an actual person that's going through like a moral, credible corporate social responsibility filter versus an AI machine that, like you said, maybe has been programmed in the wrong way by somebody who...
Well, it's programmed by people who are making moral or business-related decisions, who have some motivations. It is not choosing... That's my point. It does not have its own... It is not self-aware. It's not Cybernet or the Matrix robots or the Battlestar Galactica robots, or we can go down and down through the line of science fiction.
That's the part that scares me, that Elon Musk is the head of who's programming that and telling them what to do, and we've seen his erratic behavior and knowing how people actually get news information from there. It's disturbing, but there's also so many outlets to get news from, like our show. So
that's right.
Next up on Rising, Russia has launched its largest drone attack on Ukraine, and President Trump is not happy about it. Stay with us.
Russia has yet again unleashed a record attack on Ukraine by launching more than 700 drones, which is the most fired in a single night in the 3-year war, per official reports.
Officials say Russia fired 550 drones last Friday and 477 less than a week before that. Both of these attacks were the largest at the time.
President Trump is not holding back, expressing his own frustrations with Vladimir Putin. Here he is yesterday.
I've been sort of letting people know I'm not happy about what's going on. It's a war that should have never happened. It should not happen now. They're losing. Now it's up. I've been saying 5,000. Now it's up to 7,000 Think of it, 7,000 people a week on both sides.
As a result, Trump has greenlit sending more weapons to Ukraine, a clear change of tune. Here's Trump yesterday speaking on sending Ukraine more Patriot missiles, which are a defensive interceptor. Take a look.
They would like it. They've asked for it. They're very rare indeed, because a lot of systems have been sent to Ukraine. But they would like to. I know they made the request. We're going to have to take a look at it. It's very expensive system.
The Pentagon had paused weapon shipments to Ukraine before Trump eventually reversed his decision. CNN, citing 5 sources familiar, is reporting that Defense Secretary Hegseth did not tell the White House about the pause, which caused confusion. Senator Richard Blumenthal wrote on X, quote, "Time for Hegseth to go." Reportedly, he stopped Ukraine military aid without consulting the president, a rogue and reprehensible breach of responsibility. Add to it a series of national security breaches.
And Senator Rand Paul, meanwhile, complained on X, writing, "When are we going to stop sending military aid to Ukraine? This is a conflict we have no business being involved in." A new sanctions bill supported by Blumenthal and Senator Lindsey Graham would impose 500% tariffs on countries that import Russian energy. Speaker Mike Johnson seemed to be on board with that, and he says there is interest in the House to pass that measure. So, I understand Trump's frustration very much with Putin. Trump came into office wanting to make a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. That's very difficult to achieve because of the dreadful state that Ukraine is in as its country is being invaded. You know what? If Putin doesn't want to play ball, is not going to engage in negotiations, and Trump says, okay, then we're going to get back involved again in the Ukrainian defense, that seems like a worthwhile negotiating tactic from my standpoint. I know what Trump ultimately wants is to not be involved in the conflict. Why are you
I just can't. I wish I had pearls on to clutch them.
Why?
You literally said there's no point in Ukraine moving forward. You and I have talked about this. You said they can't win this war, so our solution is to keep funding them for the war that you believe they can't win. I've always said that we should have stood firm in our support of Ukraine because Putin was not going to come to the table and negotiate with President Trump. I mean, they had, 3 phone calls now since the beginning of the year that all were very, Trump was very confident about, came forward and said that they're making progress. And every time Putin has played in the United States' face and basically made it like a mockery and continued to not only bomb Ukraine, but like barrage them with missiles and drones almost a day or two after speaking to our own president. So I think it sends a message.
Yeah, Trump's sick of it.
That's what I'm saying. But I think from the beginning, Putin has made no concessions at all and never said he would. And the fact that the U.S. not only has criticized Ukraine endlessly, but come to the table and basically said Ukraine should agree to many of the suggestions that Russia's asking for, now puts, I think, Ukraine in an even weaker position, especially with the flip-flopping, because they can't make a strategy if they don't have a strong strategy to stick to and know who's going to support them. And know, predictability does matter in war.
They can't make a winning strategy regardless because they can't win. No one thinks they can win. Our military advisors don't think they can win, and their military advisors don't think they can win. So nothing has fundamentally changed. So the idea that we should not be involved in this conflict, per what Rand Paul says, I think is still a strong one. Now, we're trying to mitigate loss of life on both sides, and we're trying to get this to a resolution. And so I still think it behooves Ukraine to agree to terms that are, while unfavorable to Ukraine, are better than having the entire country conquered by Russia. It sounds like Ukraine is largely on board with that, so good, that side's taken care of. But Vladimir Putin, if he's not on board with that, well, then he's going to have to win the whole country by force. If that's really what he's prepared to do, that's what he's prepared to do. We should then, I think Trump's thinking is, well, then we're going to make it more difficult for you. We're not going to stop you. We can't stop you. He's still going to win this war, but we're going to make it more difficult. If Russia is prepared to conquer all of Ukraine and pay any cost to do it, well, they're going to succeed. There's unfortunately, I wish that was not the case, but no one has put forth a plan to stop that. So the idea is, can we make it hurt for them a little bit more to the point where they say, you know what, all right, let's negotiate, let's take that deal that's really good for us, rather than lose thousands of more people to take the entire country by force. That's what Trump is hoping, and that's not a bad negotiating tactic to my mind.
I'm happy that he's continuing to help fund, the people that were the victims in the situation. I think it just should have been done much earlier. This decision was pretty obvious to people that have watched this.
It's not because Ukraine can win. It's because we want to bring Russia
back
to the table.
My stance never was that they can win. My stance is that they can create a friction and a standstill that not only, global food supplies are affected by this war. It's not like NATO is involved in this war. Everyone around the country, European Union is involved in this war. People have interest in not allowing Russia to just have carte blanche over Ukraine because it pushes them in uncomfortable territory closer to some of our allies. So the point is to create more of a friction and put on sanctions on Russia and make it harder for them to just move forward so that they do want to come to the table and say, okay, maybe agreeing to everything on their list is not feasible for Ukraine or for the U.S. or people who have interest in seeing them not take over Ukraine in full. But maybe there are things that they can come to the table and agree on. But the minute that I think that we started to waver in our support of Ukraine and now come back to it is the minute that Putin's like, well, if I keep going, eventually the U.S. will get exhausted from this.
We didn't waver in our support. We wavered in our strategy because the strategy Biden had was not good.
But
the previous administration's strategy was, we'll give them whatever they want for as long as they want, which said to Russia, okay, then we're going to have an actual war until we win. There was no plan to have Ukraine win. It was impossible. We're not committing ground troops. We're not actually declaring war on Russia. We're not sending U.S. forces. We're just giving them stuff. At some point, they were going to run out of people on the ground who could even use the weapons we were giving them. I mean, we have hit that point. They've exhausted to some degree their supply of able-bodied young men, usually within military age. I'm sure you've seen the footage of, older men being dragged from their homes to go fight in this war in Ukraine. I don't know. I don't like the sight of that. That's not particularly liberal anyway. I know they're in a crisis. And then it's like, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? This is a regional conflict.
Giving them an opportunity to protect themselves. So some of the missiles that the U.S. has to offer specifically can help deter from some of the worst type of bombs that Russia has and can implement on Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I think without our support, they fail miserably.
What happens when they have all this stuff? Russia wins the conflict, conquers the country, and then all of the weapons we provided them are now just in the hands of Russia. An experience we've had with terrorist groups in the Middle East time and time again. ISIS uses gear that was left behind by us when we pulled out of various schemes we shouldn't have been involved in the first place.
I mean, I just want to know what's the excuse for, the greatest negotiator. I mean, President Trump came to the table and said even if he was exaggerating, this would be ended in days. And the fact that this is going back to let's comb through the history and say that how much Biden is impacting this.
Well, he had a bad hand. For this. You don't have the you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. That's true.
Ukraine and Russia have been going back and forth since before Biden. So it wasn't a bad hand. This is a history of Russia and Ukraine, right, over a decade. This has nothing to do directly with just Biden or directly with Trump or even Obama. I mean, that's when they got kicked out of the G8, right? So I think that you have to remember this has been going on and on. The reason they got kicked out of the G8 is because some of their stances on what they wanted to do in Ukraine. And we were like, listen, this is not appropriate for people that are part of this organization. So I think we have to remember the history here and not try to put it all on Biden like he just started this idea of protecting Ukraine against one of the biggest adversaries that the U.S. has.
Happy to put it all on Biden more than Obama, personally. It would be my thinking. Up next on Rising, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is speaking out about President Trump's fallout with Elon Musk. Really interesting interview. Stay tuned. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is reflecting on the fallout between President Trump and Elon Musk.
Here's Wiles on New York Post columnist Miranda Devine's Pod for One podcast.
The president was very, very kind to him. And Elon had so much to offer us. He knew things we didn't know. He knew people and technologies that we didn't know. It was a great thing when it was a great thing. And had a very troublesome ending.
Musk and Trump spat started over the president's big, beautiful bill, but has now escalated to issues like the Epstein files and also Musk starting his own new political party. Musk wrote on X earlier this week, how can people be expected to have faith in Trump if he won't release the Epstein files?
Trump, on the other hand, has called Musk's move to start a third party, quote, ridiculous and something that'll just cause confusion. Devine asked Wiles about why she thinks the two had such an unhappy ending. Here's Wiles' response.
I don't understand it. I don't know. I know that what has been said doesn't ring accurate to me, but I don't know. I enjoyed working with Elon. I think he's a fascinating person and sees the world differently. And I think that's probably what the president saw too, just a little bit different than the average Joe. But it certainly came to not a good ending.
Oh, Susie, you have been working with President Trump since 2016, almost a decade. You understand that anybody who criticizes him becomes a target, no longer an ally. Everyone from the outside looking in, let me just finish, who saw Elon Musk and President Trump have this bromance, knew that with these two egos and these two people in charge, this was destined to combust. This was not a surprise to us, but the surprising thing that she's saying she doesn't understand this is so wild. It's because she doesn't want to be one of the people that's on the list of people that Trump begins to target and never works with again. So she's playing nice, but she knows that both of them are demonstrating erratic behavior and that this was going to happen anyway because both of them want to make a list of people who cross them and execute on that list.
Well, but that makes it sound like their dispute is personal or personality based. It clearly isn't.
Personal? He's telling him he's in the Epstein files. It's pretty personal.
Well, that's the retaliation is personal. But the reason they have a falling out was based on policy. It is explicitly based on policy. Elon does not like the big, beautiful bill. He thinks, and I agree with him on this, that Republicans were brought to power, have promised forever to do something about the deficit. This bill expands our debt, raises the debt ceiling, adds to the deficit, doesn't do anything Republicans, it does some things Republicans promised to do, but overall is not nearly good enough. Like Rand Paul and Elon and Thomas Massey, Elon Musk has those problems with the bill, so he opposes it. He also disagrees with the tariffs and disagrees with some aspects of the immigration policies. And so it's policy based. It's not. It has become personal as they've mostly on the Elon side. Donald Trump hasn't taken that many digs at
But
Elon.
even people in Congress that were brave enough to speak up to say, hey, historically, as a conservative, these are not things that I would generally support, based on my constituents, and who I told them I was going to be when they elected me in office. And he's criticized anybody in Congress that's criticized the big, beautiful bill. He's gotten in
Trump
public,
has.
Yeah, Trump has gone on Twitter. Or not,
He's gone after Massey. He's gone after Paul.
He won't even give people a chance to criticize. And so I think when somebody with as much power as Elon Musk has outside of government, obviously he was kind of powerful, but more powerful in the business sector, is coming at him. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like another person confronting him in that way, and I think that's what we saw, except he's trying to hold his own and keep his cool this time for some reason. And Susie Wiles is probably more confused about that part.
I think this Epstein files thing is getting under his skin a little bit. This is such a big cluster F for the Trump administration, a very own goal of having promised these really sensational revelations and then just been like, oh no, there's nothing new. No, you have it all. You know everything. MAGA influencers, conservative journalists, people who've cared about this issue for a long time are not satisfied whatsoever. And I have seen, on social media at least, Trump lose more support on this than on anything else thus far. So we will be paying attention to see how that develops. Next up, former President Biden's doctor is in the hot seat, pleading the fifth after being questioned if he was ever told to lie about Biden's health. That's next.
Were you ever told to lie about the president's health?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon the physician-patient privilege and in the reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer. I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
Let the record reflect that Dr. O'Connor has invoked the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Former President Biden's physician on the hot seat, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, pleading the fifth after being subpoenaed by the Republican-run House Oversight Committee.
Oversight Committee Chairman, Congressman James Comer, saying Dr. Connor invoked the Fifth Amendment for these two questions. Were you ever told a lie about the president's health? And did you ever believe President Biden was unfit to execute his duties? While speaking with reporters after the hearing, Congressman Comer had this to say about Dr. O'Connor's refusal to answer questions.
This is unprecedented, and I think that this adds more fuel to the fire, that there was a cover-up. I believe that this adds legitimacy to the Tapper book and the other books that are in the works that are about to come out that shows there was a lot of suspicious activity taking place in the White House with respect to the president's health.
Dr. O'Connor's attorney sent a letter to the House Oversight Committee expressing concerns of his client failing to uphold physician-patient privilege. Dr. O'Connor's attorney also saying, quote, "We want to emphasize that asserting the Fifth Amendment privilege does not imply that Dr. O'Connor has committed any crime."
Well, that is all true, and he has the right to exercise the Fifth Amendment.
As
and
he
also, he has both, in his case, he has both the Fifth Amendment and, yes, the doctor-patient confidentiality argument.
Also HIPAA to consider.
Yeah, he's correct from his standpoint to do all this. It's still a shame. I would like to know what he knew, and just, putting this out there, there is no way that he did not understand the vast decline in physical and psychological ability that Joe Biden suffered over the course of his presidency. He knew, he said nothing. It's his job, I guess, to say nothing. So, yeah, I'm not like, it's not some, I guess, huge ethical lapse. You might have hoped that we lived in a country where if the president's doctor found out that the president was incapable of being the president, he might subtly suggest that to the media or something, let people in for the sake of our national security as major world events are transpiring, as peace accords and financial matters are being negotiated with Russia and China and the Middle East, and we have someone incapable of fulfilling those duties, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, that no one spoke up. The doctor didn't speak up. He's just like everybody else who didn't speak up. Fine. That's what happened, and he should definitely plead the Fifth, and that's that.
Look, we've established Biden's team certainly mishandled everything in the transparency around his health. We're on the same page. I think most Americans are.
This is the one guy who has absolutely no excuse. He's a
But where we're not on the same page is that this is not a smoking gun. This headline didn't change most Americans' days. You know what did?
Sure.
People waking up thinking about health care, thinking about whether they have Medicaid, thinking about Social Security. No, because there's so much better to do, and taxpayer dollars should not be spent on political theater. The same people who asked everyone not to relitigate what President Trump did or didn't do during January 6th or try to impeach the president again. The same way I told you when Jasmine Crockett...
But we did relitigate all those things.
When Jasmine Crockett recently brought up that she would consider impeaching President Trump again, I was like, please, no. Americans don't want to hear that. Americans do not want to hear about how the last president was unhealthy. You know what happened? He made it through his term. You know what happened? We have a new president. People who voted for President Trump got what they wanted. Every single thing cannot be about his health, because we know that this is Trump's biggest, place to lay his hat on, right? He has immigration, which people said he followed through on, and attacking President Biden. But at some point, as months pass and we get deeper into the year, we are further from a President Biden term as president. And so you cannot continue to just point fingers about how bad he did. You are in the middle of a crisis in many ways that Americans want to figure it out. And we had the book, and that was the smoking gun. Now you're harassing the doctor, and we're
harassing. We're asking a question.
He's not going to answer.
Cancer.
He's a doctor.
Biden has
He's a
cancer.
doctor.
Team Biden has claimed he just found out about it. I don't believe that. I mean, we know he had cancer for longer than that.
Tell me how that changes your day if he had cancer 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. He still is no longer president. It doesn't change it. No one in America is yearning for this information. Besides,
I don't agree. No one in America is yearning for this information.
No one that I'm talking to is yearning for this
information. Millions of people want to know more about the cover-up. They care more about what's going to happen to their
wallet. They care more about day-to-day issues. And this seems like a fluff issue that we're wasting money on.
We care about multiple things.
Much. Yes, you can do multiple things at once, but I just feel like this one is over-exaggerated because there's plenty of time to talk about this, but it doesn't change anything about policy right now.
Trust and credibility in the Democratic Party. These people pretended that Biden was good to go for another 4 years until they tried to, foist that lie on the American people. They got caught, and so we're talking to the people who clearly knew. The doctor of all people absolutely knew. I'm not sure, but I suspect he knew Biden had cancer well before, months before, certainly before the results of before Biden pulled out, before the election, and that information was not revealed. I mean, do Republicans, does Trump benefit from this level of inner protection and secrecy? People are always leaking
because
to the press because the media takes an interest in what goes on and presses sources within the administration to talk and to gossip. And, maybe this is to the Biden people's credit that they had it all on lockdown. No one was letting this secret get out until it was utterly exposed. I think that's actually bad for our country.
But perhaps this doctor didn't know about cancer well in
Oh,
advance.
come
Perhaps
on.
like his circle said, okay, cognitive decline.
This is him in the exam room. Feels all right. That's all good.
No, that's not how cancer doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it can pop up. That's what I'm trying to say. Like no one knows what he does or didn't know, and he's literally just being a doctor. You saying you're hoping for the best in the country that just reveals information about a president that's not necessary in this moment. He may have found out about
You're going
cancer.
with the "you can't handle the truth"
No,
excuse?
it's not. You can't handle the truth. He bowed out of the election a year before.
Well, after he was caught.
After he stuttered through that horrific debate, he bowed out of the election. So at that point, it really doesn't matter anymore about how healthy or not healthy he was, because he wasn't on the table to be potential president. So the fact that I think the worse that Democrats look for Republicans and for President Trump, the better he looks, even though there are a slew of things we can point to that President Trump could be doing better and more effectively right now. I think the worse that Democrats look historically, even if it was a year ago, makes Republicans look good. And so they're going to keep harping on this in the same way the Democrats did the same thing when it was time to make Trump look bad after he left office and after January 6th happened. They stayed on that topic and wasted too much time and were ineffective. So unless Republicans want to be the party that's ineffective as well, they can continue on this Biden rampage or accomplish something.
You want to moveon.org here.
I do.
don't think Democrats are ever going to stop harping about January 6th and the 2020 election. That's fine. And so I don't think Republicans, at least for right now, should shut up about the Joe Biden cover-up.
Not shut up. Let's talk about it for sure. I said it was grossly mishandled, but I do think that taxpayer dollars being spent on it and trying to bring the doctor.
I think we can have a hearing when we ask the doctor.
No, I think we can pause that hearing.
If we do 10 months of these, so I will agree with you.
Thank you.
James Comer hearings in the past have taken up with Hunter Biden, did eventually take on a note of theatricality where, okay, but nothing is being done. This is just another, we've put up or shut up. You've said you have evidence of some vast scheme to enrich the Biden family and influence foreign policy. And then the evidence that Hunter Biden himself tried to do that is pretty compelling. The evidence that involved Joe Biden, you have not actually produced yet. And I did eventually get sick of it. If that's what happens with this issue, I will also get sick of it. I'm not sick of it yet, and I am fine to put questions to the doctor.
How much time should I give this? A couple more months? We're going to go through 2026 with this? When will you be satisfied? Because you are really locked in about this story.
I'll tell
You'll let me know?
when I start to yawn when we talk about it. Then you'll know. But I ain't there yet.
Up next, did MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell call the White House press corps the stupidest? That's a quote in history of the United States. Yes, he did. We'll tell you why next.
This presidency in American history has the stupidest White House press corps in American history, as far as we can tell.
Strong words from MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell bashing the White House press corps, calling them, quote, stupidest in history of the United States. O'Donnell criticized the press corps for not holding the Trump administration accountable for posing any hard-hitting questions to the president.
Lawrence O'Donnell went on to say that the press corps has become accessories to Trump letting the president dodge critical questions. Let's watch more.
And the press corps have become accessories to pretend, and only pretend, that he is openly communicating about what he is doing in his workday when he never really answers questions. And so that is never true. And Donald Trump uses the press corps as accessories before and after the fact of his lies. Donald Trump uses White House reporters to evade questions asked by other White House reporters.
O'Donnell's reaction came after President Trump, in his last cabinet meeting, shrugged off a question from CNN's Caitlin Collins on a weapons shipment to Ukraine. Let's take a look at that.
So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
I think that's a question for the Pentagon.
Lawrence O'Donnell is awful and
This just can't be a blanket statement. Just
a loser, and he sucks. I don't know what else to say. Trump, like every other political figure, occasionally dodges questions he doesn't want to answer. I would submit to you that Donald Trump is by far the most direct and honest with the press corps politician figure we have ever seen. compared to Joe Biden, you actually can't, because Joe Biden spent very little of his time actually answering questions from the press corps. He left it to Karine Jean-Pierre, who did a terrible job answering questions. Now, on the point that, and also that was Lawrence O'Donnell calling out his own people. MSNBC sends people into the press pool. So do other liberal outlets that ask tough questions. Caitlin Collins, that was a good. So he was maligning Caitlin Collins there. She does a fine job asking questions. I don't agree with her on a lot of stuff, but it's fine. Now, so that was a bad example. If what he meant was that some of the right-wing influencer type people who are occasionally in the press room, they kind of suck up to Caroline Leavitt, and and they don't ask a lot of, even from a conservative perspective, they should be doing pushback about what are you doing to accomplish this conservative policy, that conservative policy. In the end, it's been a lot of, maybe this Epstein thing is going to end that because they're all really upset about it.
Yeah.
But they've done I'm painting with a broad brush, but some people in there have been not very professional or asking questions of powerful people. It's been more like a fandom, and that does annoy me, but I don't know that's not what Lawrence O'Donnell said in the remarks we played.
Well, I know he said that like you said, they're friends of his probably there, and people who have been in his career for 40 years that he knows ask tough questions. So what I took from watching the whole segment was that, his criticism wasn't only about individual reporters. It was about the chilling overall effect that President Trump has on journalism today and people asking questions. So we know that President Trump, like you said, I'll give you that. He does answer a ton of questions and make himself accessible.
People call him on the phone. Reporters call him and he just picks up and answers.
I watched it.
Can you imagine?
He called in. But I think that the disrespect that he, exhibits often is insane, and it probably makes a journalist question whether they want to ask a question because they might be publicly called stupid or how dumb is that? It's very a condescending, non-professional tone that he's taken. So it kind of not only verbally.
Donald just called them the stupidest people. I mean,
fine, verbally affects it. That's
Yeah.
point one. But point two is there's an active attack on media, like trying to ban AP from the press room because they're not calling it the Gulf of America.
Well, that was dumb.
Trying to tell PBS and NPR you're going to completely defund them. Suing ABC and CBS and them both bending the knee. So these are all issues that I think have created an environment where it's like, well, I want to be a critical journalist that brings important answers to the table because, like you said, both Democrats and Republicans should be asking tough questions, even particularly of the big, beautiful bill and how it aligns with anything Republican or conservative. These should be real questions coming from reporters and not just from Congress. And I think when we see that, that's when journalism is at its best. But when President Trump makes threats often that are often met with a degree of payment or apologies or, the tone completely changed where criticism, people are often now a little bit nervous trying to figure out, will I keep my job? Some people, like you said, have been in the press corps room for decades and never scared to ask a question, but they also want to continue to have a career, feed their families and all these things. So these are on reporters' minds when they know that they can get axed based off of a dispute with President Trump.
Yeah, if the point is just he could be a little bit nicer with the media, that's fine. Some of his sweeping condemnations go too far. I don't agree with all the legal actions. But that response there to Caitlin Collins was perfect. Like, I don't know, you tell me. He was just honest. Instead of, we'll get back to you on that. Well, if he doesn't know, I would rather have him admit he doesn't know than lie to the American people about it. I want honesty. I just want the truth. I don't care if it's ugly. I don't care if it's embarrassing. I just want to know the truth. And that is what we didn't get from 4 years under the Biden administration.
But the relationship between the White House press corps and the president or whoever's speaking for the president has always been a bit tense. That's the intention of it, right? I just think that we need to make sure that environment is fostered intentionally and not where we're bringing in, like you said, a bunch of favorable influencers or creating an imbalance where the people that are going to ask the tough questions are not even given the space to do it when it airs.
Democrats, it's less maybe colorful language, but Democrats attack the media too. The New York Times, hating the New York Times is now #1 personality trait of liberals. I saw so much criticism of the Times over that. We discussed this while you were away, me and Niall, the Zoran Mamdani New York Times story about how you can argue about it. I think it was deceptive. I don't think it's the biggest deal ever, but how he, checked African American on the college application. And, I don't think it's in my radar, I said I don't think it's the biggest issue ever. It's certainly, I think it's a story. I think it's fine to write about it, point out. It's interesting to discuss. And liberals, Democrats are furious that the New York Times even wrote about it. So there's media criticism that way too.
The press works best when it's not being allegiant to anyone. So even when
I agree.
you call the New York Times a liberal outlet, the fact that they can criticize or bring up, point to, shine light on something like that shows the balance there. I love that you liked that story and thought it was worth reporting. And I love that liberal people are criticizing the story, because that's the point of the press, not to be a magazine where we're working with sponsors.
So then what's the problem when Donald Trump criticizes the press?
Because he's not answering critical questions. And I think Caitlin Collins, who's been berated by
not when he doesn't know the
President Trump
answer.
before, she didn't follow up. And it's kind of like, well, in the past, maybe she would have not thought twice about following up, but because what comes next might be a personal dig, it's like, okay, fine. You're not.
But there was follow-up. Then there was subsequent reporting that it was apparently Pete Hegseth that ordered the pause, and that was done without Trump's awareness. And people can make of that what they will. That was what we discussed earlier, the basis for Richard Blumenthal has called for Pete Hegseth to resign over that. I don't really have a view, I guess, on whether the defense secretary should have enough independence to make that judgment call on his own. Probably he shouldn't. Probably that's something, well, honestly, that's something Congress should weigh in on. Is, again, a point it's becoming tired of me to even bring it up. We're so far beyond that we just have unilateral foreign policy being made by the executive branch rather than Congress wanting to do anything. But there it is.
Yeah, I think there's a bigger conversation about people's jobs feeling like they're on the line, depending on what the conversation or dialogue is with President Trump specifically. He's unprecedented. Yes, he is accessible, but it also comes with a lot of networks changing their tune a little bit.
Well, if you're in the game, you got to be ready to take a punch or two. Got to give it as well as you get it as well as you give it. All right, the man whose Hillary Clinton meme landed him in prison got his conviction overturned. That's a major step in the right direction. We'll get into it up next. The Democratic Party has embarked on a soul-searching mission since suffering a huge loss in November, winning back lost voters, crafting Project 2029, all part of a plan to bounce back. But behind the scenes, there is some infighting that's been disrupting the Dems.
The DNC disarray was on full display last winter into early spring as the race for the DNC Vice Chair reached a fever pitch. For a few months, 25-year-old Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg shared the role with Pennsylvania State Rep Malcom Kenyatta, but a technicality required a new vote. Hogg was effectively vacated in early June over promises to primary establishment Democrats, and Kenyatta won re-election.
Joining us now to discuss how he plans to help save the party from itself is Representative Kenyatta himself. Welcome to Rising. Nice to speak with you.
Happy to be here. Good morning.
So certainly want to get into your plans for Democrats and what you think the right messaging and policies should be to win back voters. But let's just get it out of the way and start with some of this recent drama. The DNC itself being in the news so much, the infighting about David Hogg, him not running for re-election. What is your take on how all of that went down and how the Democratic Party has handled this kind of rival factions, or older and younger, more moderate, more left-leaning? What's the state of the big tent, as it were?
So first of all, thank you again for having me. And this has actually been one of those situations where, as my grandmother would say, and my mom passed it on, that sometimes the lie gets halfway around the corner while the truth is putting its shoes on. And the truth of the situation was that here in the Democratic Party, we do believe in due process. After we had the election, one of the candidates who was unsuccessful had the opportunity to file a challenge. And that challenge is actually pretty simple. We elected two people on one piece of paper. She thought those elections should have been done separately, and that gave former Vice Chair Hogg an advantage and myself an advantage. And I disagreed with that. We fought it vigorously, but then there was an opportunity to have another election and put those questions to bed. I felt like the work that I had been doing with our chair and with our officers, traveling across this country, talking about what the Democratic Party's mission and message is, 3 words: make life better, that we were going to be in a strong position to win re-election. Obviously, David felt differently, and we wish him the best in everything that he's doing. But I want to be very, very clear. The Democratic Party, the DNC, our job is to not be a frickin' incumbent protection racket, okay? And so this idea that we don't want to see incumbents primaried, or we don't want to see primaries, couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. I want to see robust primaries, and then I want to do everything I can as vice chair of this party to elect Democratic nominees that are chosen by voters.
So Ken Martin called it growing pains, but you called it a mess. And so I just want to talk about this dysfunction that you're referring to and what you think the next steps are going into an election season.
So I think the next steps are crystal clear, and it goes back to those three words that ground everything we have to do as a party, and certainly ground the work that I do for my neighbors as a representative, but also in this leadership capacity. We have a responsibility to get up every single day and talk about how we're going to make life better for people. And unfortunately, this bill that was just passed out of DC, the big BS bill, makes it very clear that there's a lot of work that we are going to have to do to clean up from the mess of Donald Trump and to also address the real reality that the challenges we've faced on affordability, the challenges that we've faced on making it possible for people to get solid housing that they can afford. And you can think about many other issues that exist, but those two certainly stand out. Those challenges did not just exist in the 6 months of this administration. There are structural things that we have to address, but this president and this administration has certainly made life worse for working people and working families. And so I think it gives us an opportunity to talk about our vision for the future and to talk about what we're going to do to stop an administration that is out of control right now on so many different fronts, really looking at the rule of law, looking at our Constitution, and seeing it as I guess suggestions, and not the law of the land. And unfortunately, we've seen this president be even more gratuitous in violating the laws, violating our norms, and also in putting ourselves in a position where our economy is even more rigged for a couple of people who are millionaires and billionaires, and not for the majority of the American people who are trying to figure out how to make the ends meet.
The Democrats in the most recent election, lost ground with young voters in particular, really young men of all sorts of racial backgrounds. It was age and gender being more relevant than race, frankly, in the election. What do you think the message should be to win back young people, young men who for whatever reason, didn't feel inspired by Kamala Harris's candidacy or by what the Democratic Party was offering? This is obviously going to be key. You're a younger person, David Hogg's a younger person, and I think we talk about the gerontocracy and some structures, not just in the Democratic Party, but just in our government overall, that prevent young people or maybe not thinking about policies that are important to young people. What's your strategy on that?
So if you're playing bingo during this interview, then you know that the free space is going to be those three words: make life better. And we have to talk about how we're going to do that. But I do think to your to the point that I'm sort of getting through your question, I also think our messengers matter, and I think it says a lot good about our party that in this recent party election that we did elect a young millennial like myself, somebody who's a part of Gen Z. And if you look at what our chair has been doing throughout his time leading this party, he has put forward in terms of his slate of people who are going to be on key committees like rules and bylaws. And I know the average person's like, what the hell is rules and bylaws? But that determines how our presidential primary process plays out and how the Democratic Party functions in really critical ways. He has appointed a member of Gen Z to that committee out of New York, the single youngest person to ever sit on the Rules and Bylaws Committee. And so I think in general, we understand that not only does our message of making life better for people and digging into the details of how that's going to impact everyday folks, not only does that matter, but certainly our message matters. And my message to folks all across this country is to step up and run for office. This party will never be what it can be if you're not in it and you're not engaged. And again, I think one of the things that is a real challenge right now for the American people is the full frontal assault on affordability, on dealing with income inequality, on putting people in a position where they can really start their lives. We're seeing that in this administration with the dismantling of President Biden's SAVE plan, for example. Folks who are paying back student loans like myself are going to see a massive increase in terms of what they have to pay monthly and are going to be accruing interest at a rate that makes it very difficult. And I believe it was Fortune magazine that had a report that said there's going to be a wave of student loan defaults that disproportionately impact young people, and also some seniors that took out Parent Plus loans for their kids. And so I mentioned that to make the point that yes, a lot of young people sat out the last election because they weren't sure that Democrats, Republicans, or anybody was in it for them. We have a responsibility as a Democratic Party to spend every single day talking about how we're going to deal with the challenges they have. But I do think we also have a responsibility to highlight the ways in which the pain that people are feeling, the squeeze that people are feeling on their disposable income, is based off of policy decisions that were made by Republican members of Congress and signed into law by President Trump.
Well, Representative Kenyatta, thank you so much. As a Temple alum, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in Philadelphia and beyond. Thank
you. Owls are everywhere, I'll tell you that.
Well, we've got a lot more topics to talk about on Rising today right after this. Stay with us. Good news for free speech and for conservative influencer Douglas Mackey. A federal appeals court has overturned his conviction. As a reminder, he spent 7 months in prison posting memes about the 2016 election that jokingly suggested supporters of Hillary Clinton could vote by text.
Mackey, or Ricky Vaughn on social media, was sentenced after a jury in 2023 found him guilty of attempting to trick individuals out of exercising their right to vote. The three-judge panel on Wednesday determined that trial evidence failed to prove he engaged in a conspiracy to influence the election.
Mackey had around 58,000 followers when he made the posts, according to the DOJ. And according to trial evidence, over 5,000 people texted the number he included in the memes. It's important to note that around 98% of those respondents received an automated reply that the number was not associated with the Clinton campaign.
Mackey wrote a series of posts about the news saying, quote, "God is good and now we sue."
And Republican Senator Tom Cotton writes, the Biden DOJ's prosecution of Douglas Mackey over a meme was an outrageous abuse of power. Unfortunately, it was the norm for Biden's DOJ. They let violent criminals go free while targeting conservatives for posting memes. I'm glad this prosecution has been thrown out. And so am I, Lindsay. This was a textbook free speech violation, in my view. He was, in fact, defended, I believe, by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. This was a joke about the election, along the lines of, have you ever heard these kind of, like, hey, Democrats, don't forget to vote on Wednesday, November 11th, or whatever the day after the election is. You can do the same thing. Hey, Republicans, make sure to mail in your ballot to. It's a joke. It is your free speech to do that, and they try to prosecute him under election interference type law.
Well, we regulate robocalls. We regulate voter intimidation at polling places, but digital deception is not an issue.
Digital deception is a joke.
I actually don't think, it's not a joke. I don't think that he should have been in jail. That was overcorrection.
Yeah,
but I do think that he did something disgusting. I do think that it was irresponsible. And I do think it's important to start looking at what you're doing on social media, especially if it has something to do with our elections that are fair and free and people getting influenced where you're pretending to be in a name that's not your own and putting people of color and telling them to vote over here. Like, the average American is thinking they can get some sort of information from online. And so if people think that they voted because you're trying to trick them, but you're forgetting the LOL, that creates a problem. And the only thing that he got out on is a technicality. It's not an exoneration saying that his character is clear. So I think his lawsuit's going to go nowhere. He got out on a technicality, and I think that there was no conversation in a group chat that had this huge collusion to make this happen. And so that's the only reason why he got off, not because he didn't do anything wrong.
I think this entire law is unconstitutional, and you have the First Amendment right to mislead people about how to vote in the election. And this was not a very sophisticated little scheme, again, because it was a joke. If you are stupid enough to think that you can vote by text or on a different day, and you are opting out of the voter pool on this basis, I think this is actually a public service.
You know what's so interesting about that? We both have elderly people that we love in our families, right? And I know that or your friend's grandma or somebody that literally was like, Yeah, I was getting a text from Cash App, and they told me, oh, I got to pay 10 to get my grandson in daycare or whatever. Like, this has come across my desk multiple times in conversations with people older than me. I don't think these people are dumb. These are people who had full careers just on social media using an entire new tool that they're not that comfortable with in the same way that millennials are, anybody younger than us. And so I think that to say a blanket statement like anybody who falls for this is dumb is too loosely used, because we understand that social media is like this whole vortex, like AI is for even younger people, of people not knowing really how to navigate it, how to decipher it. And so if you're just going to call all Americans dumb.
I'm not calling all Americans dumb.
Anybody who falls for that, that's
however
crazy.
many
58,000 people might have thought that there was an option in 2023 that makes it accessible to vote in a digital capacity. I mean, everything else is digital. So I think that he was trying to be deceptive. I don't think that he created an entire... He was not. Where was the laughing emoji? He literally put up people of color on a poster and said, text this, vote now. You know, he literally was trying to target one community, was not using his name. So you just think he's a good person? He should just... I don't care if he's a good person or not. He has free speech rights. He can say bad things. You cannot like what he had to say. The idea of going to... This isn't some authoritarian country. This isn't France. This isn't Germany. In America, you can say dumb things on social media and not have the police show up at your door and put you in. It doesn't... Manipulation is not.
If it's fun, it was manipulation.
He's trying to manipulate people and saying the only thing that the judge is saying is that maybe he didn't plan this well in advance with a group of others, but he still was trying to manipulate people.
First Amendment gives you
around
that right
voting.
To persuade people not to vote. If I tweeted, hey, I don't want Democrats to vote, I don't like their policies, you're going to lock me up for this?
No, I don't think it was that simple. It's about our voting and our laws being protected.
Exact same thing. I think this is a kind of voter intimidation. It's an intimidation against dissent and humor and free speech, and I was glad to see them lose, and I would have the whole edifice of this ridiculous law struck down as obviously violating our cherished First Amendment rights. But we can agree to disagree, I guess. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, now available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and we will see you later.